Read every single day, read every single night, take every single chance you can to pick up a book. And it really is, standing on the shoulders of giants when you pick up these books.
This is The Entrepreneur Way with Neil Ball. Unlocking the secrets of successful entrepreneurs 7 days a week. Subscribe to our podcast and follow us on Twitter at Neil D. Ball. Napoleon Hill said the power of the mastermind is the driving force. To discover how you can unlock the potential in your business using the power of a mastermind, go to mastermindunlimited.com. And now, here is your host, Neil Ball.
Hello everybody, it's Neil Ball here. Thank you so much for joining me today on The Entrepreneur Way. The Entrepreneur Way is about the entrepreneur's journey, the vision, the mindset, the commitment, the sacrifice, failures and successes. I am so excited to bring you our special guest today, Charles Lew. But before I introduce you to him, I have a little bit of trivia for you. Jacqueline Novogratz said, "You have to learn to ask questions in a way that will elicit more nuanced answers rather than the answers you would like to get." The Entrepreneur Way asks the questions so we all get the insight, inspiration and ideas to apply in our businesses. Charles, welcome to the show. Are you ready to share your version of the Entrepreneur Way with us?
Neil, it's a pleasure to be here. I'm ready. Let's do this.
Great. Charles Lew owns and operates multiple hospitality concepts across the United States. He also consults on numerous restaurant and lounge projects throughout California. Charles is recognized as one of the city's leading experts on not only the operational aspects of restaurants, but the equally important, although lesser understood, licensing, permitting and zoning of hospitality venues. Charles, can you provide us with some more insights into your business and personal life to allow us to get to know more about what you do and who you are?
Sure, absolutely, Neil. So, yeah, I think that was a pretty good intro, and it sounded pretty interesting. And it's to kind of break it down, we run, as the intro said, from the kind of creation, incubation, and operation of restaurant concepts, all the way through the consulting on the operations and the consulting on the permitting and licensing of restaurants and lounges, and really at this point, almost all hospitality concepts, even hotels. So we pretty much, between my partner and I, we go from, as I said, the incubation, creation, operation of these concepts all the way through. And then what we found was, being lawyers, people would see the relative success that we were having, and they would say, hey, why don't we hire these guys and bring them in to help us consult on our projects and hopefully avoid the pitfalls and mistakes that very, very easily can put people out of the restaurant business.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So you say you do consulting. Is it consulting on startups, or do you do consulting on existing concerns as well?
Right. So both, Neil. So we'll definitely do consulting on startups. That's a big chunk of the consulting business. But what we've seen recently is quite a lot of consulting on operating businesses. So, right now, for example, not to bore you with too much legislation in the United States, but there's a huge movement right now for payroll and minimum wage, and a big increase in minimum wage. So obviously, as a restaurateur, one of your main costs, so as a little bit of background for your listeners, you've essentially two main costs, and then you've got some smaller costs that add up. But your main costs are your COGS, your cost of goods sold, and your labor. So, the kind of golden rule is always to try to keep your COGS and your labor around 30%, 25 to 30%, and that provides enough room for you to make money in your food service restaurant, your food service concept. So what we've seen recently is, because of the increase in labor costs and because of the new legislation, there's a lot of restaurateurs right now, and they're looking at the concept, and they're realizing that when the minimum wage increases, their concept is going to be really damaged by this. And now they're trying to figure out if there's any way to take existing concepts and manipulate them and maneuver them into a less labor intensive concept.
Okay. And so you sound like Gordon Ramsay with a law degree. Is that?
I like that. I've never had that description, but I like it. Okay, we're gonna go with it. All right.
So you're still a practicing lawyer?
Yeah, I am. I have about 5 clients outside of the consulting business that basically won't let me quit being a lawyer. They've been with me, for over a decade now. And as much as I don't really want to practice too much, for whatever reason, they're very happy with what I do, and I'm happy enough being their lawyer that I continue to do it. But it's definitely very limited portion of my time is actual practice of law outside of restaurant specific.
Mm-hmm. And what do you enjoy most about what you do, Charles?
Eating, Neil. I enjoy eating.
Well, it's a good business to be in for that.
Yes. And drinking. I enjoy scotch. So between eating and scotch, that's that's a big portion of what I like about what I do. Joking aside, it really is. So it's as tedious and as involved and as many moving parts as a restaurant job is. I snapped a picture on Instagram earlier, and it was pretty funny. It was 5 burgers that were lined up at one of the restaurants, and it was essentially my job to try them all and pick out very, very subtle nuances and kind of make a determination of which of the 5 variants of this one type of burger I like best. So, that's not the worst job that someone could have.
So you mentioned Instagram there. How much do you use social media to actually market your business? Do you do that?
I do. And, I actually just got asked to write a very brief article on that. And, I would say that in the past, my social media use had been pretty limited. But recently, over the past year, I've really tried to step it up just because you start to realize here that, and statistically, all the statistics are readily available. So you can go on, Google and search it out. But some of these numbers are pretty dramatic. They'll say that X percent of all internet searched restaurant sourcing. So every lead that essentially comes from an internet search, 20% of them are coming from Yelp, or 15% of them are coming from Instagram or Facebook. And you see these numbers and they're real numbers. If you're talking about 300 covers a day, 300 heads a day, and you're realizing that, 15% of that is coming from social media interaction. That's, 1/6, 50 people a day, give or take, my math, forgive my math, but let's go 50 patrons a day at $30 a head. It's $1,500. So you all of a sudden sit there and say, wow, that's a huge portion of my income generated from social media. So at this point, you can't ignore it at all. You cannot be in this game and not partake in social media to some degree.
I think some places, I don't know if you do this, but I know some restaurants actually probably encourage their patrons to actually use social media and tell the world about what they do. Do you do anything like that?
I actually try not to. There's definitely a lot of restaurants, you'll see like check in with us on Facebook or check in on Foursquare and get a free appetizer, or do this and do that. I actually don't like that. I try not to do it. I feel like, the social media's job is to kind of get the person in there. And then my product and my service is what should make that person's experience a great experience, not the fact that they got a free side of onion rings. So I like bringing the people in with pictures and explanations and beer pairings. And we've got this rare craft beer. We have this, beer that's aged in a bourbon barrel with vanilla notes and this and that, and all these things that people look at on an Instagram picture and say, wow, I never ever thought of a burger with fig jam and Gruyere and this and caramelized onions. That sounds incredible. They see a picture of it, they say, oh my gosh, I'm going. They run in, and then we have them. And if our product lives up to the Instagram pictures, we're in good shape.
Yeah, I suppose if the experience is good enough, people will tell the world about it in any case, won't they?
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And I don't want to bribe them with the side of onion rings.
Yeah, okay. And what is it that drives you, Charles?
That's a good question, Neil. I don't really know. I get bored very easily. So I think from an entrepreneurial perspective, I've enjoyed some fun projects in the past, and now as the restaurant business is getting, I don't want to say more successful, because I think that's a very broad term, but I would say more stable. Yeah. As the restaurant business that we're in is more stable, and at this point in time, I'm able. I live in Los Angeles, which as I kind of I would mention that it really is, kind of imaginary land. Whatever I can come up with in my head, I can find someone in this city that will believe I can do it and will support me. So, it really just fosters this creative entrepreneurial mindset that makes you sit one day and say, I've always wanted to do this, or I've always wanted to do that. So, from that perspective, the restaurants are incredible, but we're just always looking for other stuff. And, I think the startup is, to not ramble on, but I think the startup is what gets me excited. It's that initial idea, and it's, sitting there and saying, you know what, I just thought of something. Why did no one ever do this? And then it's a 30 seconds on Google typing it out and seeing that, oh, wow, no Google search came up, so maybe they didn't. And then the name, and then the GoDaddy search for the name, and oh my gosh, I can't believe this name's open. I think it's that, it's that kind of that process, that excitement that just kind of keeps you going and keeps your mind going, and I don't know, keeps you wanting to do more and add more and create more.
I know from my experience, when I had quite a large business, the growth stage of it was the exciting part of it. And when it started to sort of level off a bit, it became less exciting and more like it was more like a sort of a job in a way, I suppose. So I can understand what you're saying there. That makes total sense to me. How do you relax when you're not working in your business?
If you ask my wife that question, she'd say I never do. And she would say, even when you're in a conversation with me, you're on your phone and you're Instagramming this, or you're tweeting this, or you're emailing a lease, or you're answering a question. So, I guess, for pure relaxation, definitely read. I think it's so underrated, and I think that like all the knowledge in the world literally is now so accessible with iTunes and iBooks and all this stuff. So I think reading is just imperative. It's talking about standing on the shoulder of giants to see further. I mean, literally every single mistake, that 99% of mistakes that will ever be made have been made. So I think you can do yourself a huge favor by reading. And most recently, podcasts. I started listening to them probably about a year ago, and as you probably know, Los Angeles traffic is the most bizarre and unpredictable thing in the world. And there's no rhyme or reason to any of it. It doesn't work with the rush hour. There's this rush hour thought process that, the roads will be busy from 8 to 9:30 and from 4 to 6. Well, you leave at 1 in the afternoon, and for no reason, a 12-mile commute will take you an hour and 30 minutes. So. Wow. You find yourself in that type of traffic, you have plenty of time to listen and catch up on some podcasts and, kind of get inspired prior to your meeting and, maybe learn a little something or just see what everyone's doing. I think it's so important to keep up on not even your competitors, because I think even the restaurant business, we're really not in competition with anybody except ourselves. Yeah. And I always tell my employees that. They say, oh, this person's doing this, and this is a new concept, and this is a top chef, and he's now doing a burger restaurant, and this guy's doing this. And like, guys, we're competing against ourselves. If the product we make is good and the service is good, we'll be fine. So just try to read and try to learn, and obviously try to get in the gym 3 or 4 days a week, so I don't look like I own a chain of burger restaurants and bars and restaurants, because I don't really want the appearance that I do nothing but taste food all day. So a little bit of that also. I
think it's quite good. I don't know if you find this, but I find it's always good to get perspective from other industries as well, isn't it? Because you can sometimes draw from those and bring them back to what you're doing.
Absolutely. No, I mean, I couldn't agree with you more. I think, you can look at it, especially, from my perspective, there's, the promotions and marketing is such an interesting business that, it's really its own world. It's not like there's promotions of restaurants or marketing of a clothing brand or this. It's promotions and marketing and now I think there's a lot more on it. There's a lot of really incredible books have come out recently about it. But yeah, I'm fascinated by that. And I think there's so much to be kind of gleaned from the world of promotions and marketing and applied to all your businesses or any business for that matter.
Absolutely. And do you have any entrepreneur role models?
100%. Without a doubt, Richard Branson. I grew up in Scotland, so I remember going to Glasgow, and I remember going to the Virgin store in Glasgow, and it was just behemoth. It was this massive store, and you'd walk in and there was so much energy, and it was young and hip before it was young and hip before it was cool to be young and hip, which is a funny statement. But it was kids and youth when that wasn't the good thing, when that was not looked at as there was no internet, so there was no 23-year-old billionaires and 26-year-old billionaires. So being young was being inexperienced and being poor. But Branson to me had I don't know if it was a vision and subsequently now reading biographies and books on him and books about the Virgin Way and all this stuff, you realize that he was just really always ahead of his time, always. I mean, if you read his story, you realize that even more so that there was just some kind of guiding principle there that was just not available to the ordinary person.
He's done incredibly well in business, but one thing that always fascinates me about him is how well known he is around the world. I mean, I've talked to people in Australia, I've talked to people in America, and everybody knows about Richard Branson and talks about him as one of those people up there with Steve Jobs and people like that. And it's amazing what he's done, really, because he's an entrepreneur, but he's done really, really well. And in terms of being known, I suspect some of his antics in the 80s and 90s might have contributed to that when he was doing his ballooning and his speedboat records and things. I'm sure that got a lot of attention for him. So it was a very clever move from him and that. But yeah, so Giles, can we go back? Can we go to a time before you were an entrepreneur? And can you talk about some of the difficulties that you had to overcome to start your business?
Sure. So I grew up in Scotland. I moved to Florida. I actually was born in New York and moved to Scotland when I was extremely young. Moved back to the United States to Florida for high school. Went to college in Florida and then moved to Los Angeles for law school. So, I mean, I think if I had to kind of start with the kind of wide eyes and the recognition of the world being a little bit of a big scary place, it would probably be the initial move to Los Angeles. You come to Los Angeles from Tallahassee, Florida, and things are big and fast, and really most importantly they're very expensive. So you get out here, and instead of a gallon of gas being $1.19 at the time, a gallon of gas was $2.60. And, they tell you in law school, you can't work. You should not be working, your first year of law school. It's a horrible idea. It's a guaranteed, recipe for failure. But you get out here and you realize that if you don't work, then you'll be homeless and hungry. So you basically say, okay, let me get a job and kind of puzzle through this. And, so I'd say that was a huge eye opener and definitely not the traditional path for a first year law student. I ended up, I had no real appreciable talent. So what I ended up doing was, security. I was, big, and I've always been fairly large. I was about 240 pounds. I don't know how many stone that is, but quite a lot. And, I had no, like I said, it was the only job I could get where I could work the hours and still enable me to go to school. But obviously, as you can imagine, it's not really conducive to good grades to be at a bar or nightclub till 4 a.m. throwing people out and then, show up at your torts, your torts class or your civil law or your criminal law class at 8 a.m. and have been expected to read 50 pages and you still smell like the tequila that was spilled on you at 2 a.m. So that was definitely interesting and an interesting couple years and presented some definite difficulties, but it was, all learning process and stuff that, kind of made me a little bit better and a little bit more resilient and more capable of carrying, non-traditional burdens that other people maybe didn't have to deal with or were fortunate enough to not have to deal with. And then after law school, kind of the same thing, very non-conventional. Everybody decided they wanted to be a lawyer. And I kind of found myself continuing in this bar nightclub path, and by a series of very interesting events, ended up as a very small owner of a bar that turned into the most popular bar nightclub in the city. So followed that up subsequently with another bar nightclub that turned into an extremely popular nightclub. And then, as with a lot of people, you have a little success and you think that you're just, extraordinarily intelligent and that you're, destined for a life of success after success. Yeah. So then you throw in, a monumental failure or two, and then you find yourself sitting there going, kind of wondering about the career path you've taken because you've obviously taken a real hard right. So you've really taken this massive detour from what would have been the traditional path. And you find yourself in a very different place. And you realize that there's not this, you have a heel, right? You realize that you have your Achilles heel. There's not this, the air of invulnerability kind of dissipates and you're sitting there going, wow, I better figure out what I'm doing. So, had more than one or two or three of those, kind of at that point in time, world-ending catastrophic failures, and just learn to kind of pick yourself up, and I think the secret of it is to try to learn something, but we're not all perfect, so we're not always going to learn something, and sometimes we're going to leave and just be beat up and tired, and I think, but the one thing you can do is keep moving. You can always kind of keep going and start again and figure out just how to emerge from it, if not wiser or more informed, at least a little tougher with a little thicker skin. Okay. So it's been, so that's kind of, it's been a what now 16 years since I finished law school. And, I think we're getting ready this year to open our 11th, 12th, and 13th restaurant with multiple concepts. So It's been a interesting journey.
So did you have any doubts that delayed you starting your business?
Yeah, I think like the entrepreneurial kind of mindset we all kind of have, and most of the people that I work with and deal with on a daily basis are at least all of an entrepreneurial mindset, even if they are in more traditional jobs. And I think we all kind of have, to some degree that same concern, that same, the social, the concern over, like the societal view of what you're doing and this non-traditional, and why would you do that when you could do this? And, is it, dangerous? Not, obviously not physically dangerous per se, but is it a dangerous move to do this? Is it short-sighted? Is it, so I think you have all of those, and I think that's where, family and your support system is obviously very, very important, because I think a lot of people go through their life, or their adult life prior to retiring, and they end up at 70 years of age and sitting there saying, I really had no desire to do what I did, but it's safe, and you succumb to these kind of societal pressures. No one wants to be the starving artist or the starving author or the person getting their gas turned off or their water turned off. So yeah, I think, I had the same concerns that everybody does when they sit there and they turn down that, that weekly paycheck, that, K1, regular, big companies got my back and they're going to take 10% of my salary and put it somewhere nice and clean for my retirement. And they're going to give me some stock options. And, I'm going to get 10 days vacation a year. And if I stay here for 20 years, I'll end up at 30 days vacation a year. So absolutely, there's always a concern when you don't take that type of job. Yeah. And, even now, it's funny, I actually got a really interesting call about 2 weeks ago without naming the company, but it was from a massive restaurant hospitality company in the United States. They're actually global now. And it was to take over the Northwest region for this hospitality, this food concept. And, of course, my initial reaction was, to say, the guy that actually found me on LinkedIn, and my initial reaction was to say, you found me on LinkedIn, so you obviously see that I don't work for anybody. I work for myself. And, at least in the social media world, it looks like we're growing well and doing fairly well. And he said, yeah, I do understand that. And I did see that, but I'd at least like to run this opportunity past you because it really is quite the opportunity. And when he did present it, it was everything that someone in that world could ever dream of. I mean, it's a massive, successful company that is, going to be here as long as restaurants and food concepts are here. And it was a huge salary with stock options and vacation days. So you kind of look at it and you think to yourself, wow, that's a great kind of opportunity. But then you take a step back and you say, I've kind of been going at it on my own, with my partners and stuff, but on my own, as far as there's no parachute. So you've been going at it on your own, for 15 years. And now you're at a point where you're really making a run of it. Like you don't kind of quit now. You don't throw the towel in now, but it is interesting that even now, those opportunities present themselves and still make you sit for a second and kind of ponder, what you're doing and where you're going.
I could sort of understand what you're saying, but I don't know if I could take that step back into a job. It's not certainly wouldn't work for me. But so what mistakes did you make that slowed your journey?
Wow. Any that you can come up with. Anything that you could formulate right now, I could pretty much guarantee that I made it. I mean, overextending, delays, not being aware of competition, not looking at geographics and demographics and understanding the business that I was putting and where I was putting it, not doing due diligence, not being too trusting of people, not looking at 5 years down the road, but looking at 6 months down the road, and not realizing that things that are trending now, you cannot start. So, for example, if I look at something that's trending right now and I say donut shops in Los Angeles are trending, so 4 or 5 of them have popped up. If I run right now and do a donut shop, I'm very, very late to the game. So that's the type of thing that took a couple years and a couple mistakes to figure out. Is you can't chase trends. You have to either anticipate trends or, if you're, again, someone like Richard Branson, or one of these guys, you create them. So I think you have to learn not to chase, you have to learn to get on the assets that we have, the internet, which, is just incredible, and Yelp and these resources and Instagram, and look and see and try to figure out what's not 6 months down the road, or definitely not what's popular right now, or even 6 months down the road, but, where the market's going to go in 2 years and 3 years and 5 years. And And we're kind of doing that right now. We're really diving headfirst into coffee, and everybody says, "Well, coffee's been around forever." And there's Starbucks and there's Coffee Bean, and there's 800,000 coffee concepts. And you say, "Yeah, there is, but there's not as many craft coffee concepts. So there's not as many third wave coffee concepts." So, then I sit and look at it and I say, okay, we're going to do this coffee market concept, and we're going to add this healthy market concept that doesn't rely on labor. So we're not worried about the increasing the legislation, the increasing payroll that's hitting us this year and next year. And then you break down all the numbers, and people say, well, how much more coffee can people consume? The United States is the number one consumer of coffee in the world. And then you dig a little deeper into that and you say, they are the number one coffee consuming country in the world. However, the per capita consumption of coffee in the United States compared with other countries is very, very small. So even though we're 300 million people drinking a cup of coffee a day, so 300 million cups of coffee a day, you might find that the United Kingdom consumes on average 4 cups of coffee a day. So even though there's X number of people, there's actually much more room for growth of coffee consumption in the United States than, some other country. So I think it's just so important to kind of read between the lines and look at the information, and where we're so fortunate as opposed to just 20 years ago, literally, as every single piece of knowledge in the entire world is sitting right in front of me right now. And of course my computer screen's on TMZ, which I don't know if your listeners know what that is, but it's not a good source of information. But I digress. Every piece of information is in front of you, and readily available. So I think it's just a good time. It's a good time to really partake in it and study it and immerse yourself in it.
And what are some of the things that you did before you started your business that would be helpful tips to some of the listeners who haven't yet taken the first step of the entrepreneur way?
Right. So I think the most helpful tips I could give to any listener or any starting entrepreneur, I think I'd probably have 2. The first one would be I would tell them to read literally everything they can get their hands on. There's just a wealth of business books out there right now. Every single day there's new ones. Every single time you look on the New York Times bestseller list, there's new ones. I think Trump's got about 5 of them out now, so you could, I guess you could avoid those depending on whether or not you like them. But I've actually even read his books, and they're interesting, and there's probably some information in there that would help you. One of the things I would also say is I'd say don't look at a book and judge it by its cover. So my example there would be 2 of my favorite books are The Power of Positive Thinking and Think and Grow Rich. Both of those books are 100 years old. And so your initial kind of reaction, I think, would be to, especially if you read the first, chapter of them, you actually see that a lot of the information seems antiquated and not really applicable to the modern day at all. Really not applicable at all. But I think once you kind of read between the lines with those books, you realize that it's more about the principles of business and the wisdom that's contained within those books and those pages that are not only as applicable today, but I think some of them are actually even more applicable today because of the fact that there's certain things were merely hypothesized back then that now we've subsequently find out to be not science fiction, but science fact. So there's even more support for some of the theories in those books that were written 100 years ago to business today, and more truth in them even now than there was back then. So I think if you could read, I would tell people read everything. Read every single day, read every single night, take every single chance you can to pick up a book. And it really is, standing on the shoulders of giants when you pick up these books. The other thing I would say is, and I think I used to really have mixed feelings about it, but now I would 100% recommend is to find a mentor. And I never really had anyone growing up from a business perspective that I could look at and really follow in their footsteps and go to with business questions and business queries. But I think in retrospect now, I think it's an extremely, extremely valuable relationship, is that mentor-mentee relationship, because I think it really can help you avoid making a lot of mistakes. And you know, I think there's value and there's something to be said for learning on your own. But, you know, when I look back at some of the mistakes, I think I'd rather have not made them and not learned whatever the hell the lesson I learned from that was. I'd rather have not learned it and not had to go through that. So I think that would be my two really kind of pivotal things that I would say to someone just starting in that kind of entrepreneurial journey.
Yeah, you've just made me think of something else there. You talk about Think and Grow Rich, and that talks about the power of a mastermind. Have you ever been in a mastermind?
Yeah, so, you know, Neil, I think about that a lot, actually, because I love that book and I've thought about it, and I've actually read subsequent books about mastermind groups. And, you know, I don't think so. I don't think I've ever been in, you know, that group where you feel like there's this, you know, just incredible symbiotic relationship between everyone where, you know, there's almost like this sharing of a brain and thoughts are transferring without almost being spoken. I think I've had meetings like that with partners and I think I actually just had a meeting with a group of guys. Actually, it's funny you asked that, Neil, because I would say a meeting I participated in 2 days ago was probably the closest I've ever been to a meeting that felt like that. And I'll tell you, the funny part about it was all people I'd just met for the first time. Yeah. So it wasn't a group that I had, you know, had years of experience with, where we knew each other's kind of strengths and weaknesses. It was actually the first time I'd sat with this group. And I would say, in all of my business experience, it was maybe the most the most pure of a mastermind group feel that I think I've encountered.
I've experienced that in meetings I've had in the past, where things seem to just appear from, thoughts just seem to come from nowhere almost, or you come up with ideas just by being with other people and bouncing ideas around. And Charles, can we talk about your entrepreneurial journey itself now? So there are a few things I'd just like to ask you about that. Do you think culture is important from the beginning in a business?
I don't. And I don't because I think that, again, it's something I think I said at the beginning. If the business is set up well and the product is of such quality that it demands people to take notice of it, and the service of that product is such the same, I think you actually will see cultures grow around that business. So I don't think it's a necessity to start the business with the culture. I think the culture can develop, and the actual consumer can develop with the business, the consumer and the culture.
Okay. And knowing what you know now, is there anything that, if you'd known it when you started out, would have helped you to shortcut the learning curve?
That's a really good question. Is there anything that would have helped me shortcut the learning curve? No, I think the only thing, again, I would say is I think that mentor-mentee relationship could have been extremely valuable to me, and I think it could be extremely valuable to other people. I just think it's one of those things where you could have someone that's been there before, and now I look at mistakes people make, and I can tell them certain things to do and not do, and I feel like I can save them a year of time. So I think that would have been the shortcut.
Okay. And how much does gut feeling influence your decisions in your business?
I would say personally, it's maybe at times it's too influential. I definitely am very instinctual with how I react to certain things. And I think there's certain times where maybe a more thorough thought process would actually behoove me. And I do not partake in that to the degree that it may necessitate. I think sometimes I go a little too gut instinct, and sometimes it bites me in the ass.
And then sometimes you ignore it and wish you hadn't.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I know that feeling. Charles, life is made of constant change, whether we like it or not. And some would say that the only constant is change. How do you try to keep up with change?
So, I think that's a great question. Like, what do we do to anticipate change? And I think it's extremely relevant to the food business and the hospitality business. And there's a really great quote on a TV show, a historical TV show I watched a little while ago, and it was on the titans of industry, so Rockefeller and Carnegie and these guys. And the guy said, again, the key with these individuals was that they saw not 6 months down the road or a year, but they actually saw 5 and 10 years down the road. And I think that's the key. I think the key is to know that change, as you said, is inevitable and try to look for trends. I mean, we've got the greatest resource device that's ever been available to the human race at our fingertips. So, with a little work and a little due diligence, I feel like we can really anticipate and plan for and see change and progression and just how things are going to move in the future.
Okay. And my next question is about your favourite book. Now, you've obviously already talked about books, but do you have a favourite book on entrepreneurialism, business, personal development, leadership, or motivation? And can you tell us why you have chosen it?
Yeah, so I think just to kind of throw a wrench in your question, I think my favorite book is again, I think we mentioned them, The Power of Positive Thinking and Think and Grow Rich. Those are kind of the books that just kind of always guided me, and I just found a lot of merit in them and a lot of truth in the words. There's a new book that I read that's not 100 years old, and it's called The Slight Edge, and it's by an author called Jeff Olson. I don't know if you're familiar with it or if your readers are familiar with it, but if they're not, they should be. And I mean, they should be because it's a great book. Again, it's called The Slight Edge, and I don't want to, paraphrase the premise of the book because that's the author's job. But kind of what I took from it was just that, just very, very small incremental changes over a long period of time can result in massive, massive changes over a long period of time. So, short variations and changing course by 1 degree 1,000 miles later can end up in you being in an entirely different continent, literally. So I like that, and I think it's very applicable, and I think it's something that, we can't all wake up tomorrow and say, tomorrow when I wake up, I'm going to be a marathon runner. I'm going to be, the greatest chess player in the world. But what we can do is we can wake up tomorrow and say, tomorrow I'm going to run half a mile. And then the next day I'm going to run a quarter of a mile more, and, et cetera, et cetera. So it's a premise that these slight incremental changes can really make the world a difference.
Yeah. Okay. And do you apply that in what you do?
I tried. Yeah. I try. It's, I would love to say, Neil, that I do, and I do try. But there's days I don't. There's days I get home at 10 o'clock at night and I have a 24-hour fitness 5 miles away, and it would be very, very easy for me to get back in my car and drive over and go to the gym, and I don't. So, I try, though. I think in my head, my intention is to go, so I'm halfway there.
Now, what I was meaning was, do you apply the sort of slight change in your business?
I do. I mean, I try to apply it in every way. So I'm sorry if my answer was a little misleading. I just thought in the context of fitness, I try to, do that. And in business, 100%, I sit there and I think, these slight variations, you can't introduce huge change to patrons, especially in a restaurant that they're comfortable with or that they love. But what I've learned, and I think is very applicable, is you can see a goal that you want to get to, and you can see your starting point, and you can realize that over the period of a year, with again, very, very slight changes, you could get to where you want to be. So yeah, 100%. I think the book is very, very applicable to all manners of business, and definitely something that I use regularly.
Everyone, when you have a busy life, listening to audiobooks is a great way to expand your knowledge in the time that when you're doing other things such as driving or when you are at the gym. We have a special offer for you of a free audiobook of your choosing. To choose your free audiobook, go to www.freeaudiobookoffer.com. As long as you haven't already signed up, then you will qualify. Charles, can we now sort of fast forward a little bit and think into the future a little bit? So what one thing would you do with your business if you knew that you could not fail?
So yeah, Neil, I think that's a great question. What would I do if I knew we couldn't fail? I think the one thing that we try to do is we try to do a lot of locally sourced and organic, and we try to do, we're obviously not a vegetarian restaurant, or none of my restaurants are vegetarian, and some of them are actually fairly carnivorous, for lack of a better way to put it. But I think if I could sit right now and know that they couldn't fail, I think I would love to, be even more eco-friendly and be more animal-friendly. And not to say that we would turn into vegan restaurants per se, but just, really try to continue to make steps to be more conscious of not only the earth as a whole, but the animals on it.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great answer. And what skill, if you were excellent at it, would help you the most to double your business?
Wow. These are some good questions, Neil. These are,
I've challenge you.
Yeah, I've done a couple of these, and these are definitely the most creative questions that I've had on any podcast interview. They're usually so run of the mill that I feel like I can stick the mind on cruise control. Mm-hmm. What skill? Yeah. What skill that I don't really have right now? What skill?
Well, it might not be something you've not got. It might be something that you could get better at.
Right. What skill could I have? I don't know if this is applicable or if this is a fair answer, but this is something that I cannot do, and I wish I could. And I actually think about it every year. Is I'm not multilingual, and I think that in this global community that we're in, I think it's so important, and I don't really think it matters what language it is. I don't care if it's Spanish or Arabic or Chinese or Russian or whatever, but French. I think it is so important to be multilingual because it's such an icebreaker. You're going to run into a Chinese individual, a Russian individual, a French individual, and especially once you get a certain level in business, it's such an international community. You might run into a Russian person that you're in some kind of business relationship with. I'd say once a month I interact or encounter a Russian person, and I think to be able, even if it was rudimentary Russian, to be able to speak with the person in their first language, I think would be just a monumental aid. And that's definitely something that I wish I could do, or I could do better.
Yeah, you could do that in your traffic jams in LA.
I could definitely pick up another language.
In 5 years from now, if a well-known business publication was publishing an article on your business after talking to your customers and suppliers, what would you like it to say?
Wow. Okay. I would like the well-known publication in 5 years to say that my business was a wonderful experience that was not only culinarily a culinary delight and interesting from a culinary perspective, but made the patron feel as if they were in a home kitchen, and that I had done it all in a socially conscious manner.
Okay, beautiful. We are now at the part of the show where you share 3 golden nuggets with us. So, Charles, what's your favorite quote and how have you applied it?
So to paraphrase, my favorite quote is from a Rocky Balboa movie, Rocky, and it's basically that it doesn't matter how hard you hit, it's how hard you can get hit and get back up, how hard you can get hit and keep moving. That to me is just I think it's so applicable, especially in the entrepreneurial world, because what you realize again in the entrepreneurial world is you're going to you're going to take such a beating. You're going to be subjected to, just experiences that you could never. School, for example, could never prepare you for. There's no classes. And I don't care if they're entrepreneur classes. There's nothing that can prepare you for the beatings that you're going to take. And so I think that I've applied that just by getting back up. For lack of a better way to put it, I've applied it by taking that beating and being able to take it and live with it, and not only, again, like I said, move on from it, but maybe be tougher after it. Not necessarily better, but definitely tougher. So I think that's a great quote. Another individual that I've always been fascinated by his quotes, and just I've read biographies and autobiographies and historical accounts, was Winston Churchill. I think he's such a fascinating individual, because you talk about someone that was literally assailed on all sides and really had was in a situation of pretty much hopelessness, and not only managed to retain hope within himself, but to inspire a literal country to be hopeful, and really at that point in time, the rest of the world. So I love his quotes. Two of my favorite quotes from him are, "If you're going through hell, keep going." And I just think there's something just profound about that. If you're going through hell, keep going. And I think it has to end at some point. So I think that's an amazing, amazing quote. And then there's another one from an entrepreneurial perspective that I love. And I don't want to mess this up, but it's success consists of going from failure to failure without the loss of enthusiasm. I think that's it, and I might have a word or two off, but I think that's another one that is so applicable to what we do, Neil, to your show and to what I do on a daily basis, because again, we're going to fail, and we're going to continue to fail. And if I can jump back, on a computer with you, after 10 years of failures, now, with intermittent successes, and sound somewhat enthusiastic, then I think that's words to live by.
You got to have tenacity, haven't you? I think that's the thing.
Yeah.
And do you have a favorite online resource that you can share with us?
I do, and it's a little different because it's very applicable to my particular business. But it's Yelp. And Neil, that's probably a little odd to some people, but and I'd say this, I say obviously take all Yelp reviews with a grain of salt, especially the negative Yelp reviews on my restaurants. They're obviously all fake. But I think the interesting thing about Yelp is, if you have 100 Yelp reviews, take the 20 good ones, the 20 best ones out, take the 20 worst ones out, and that 60 in the middle, I think, is an incredible example of your product. So I think and I don't care what your product is, because Yelp was originally restaurants and now they Yelp about everything. So I think there's so much information can be gained by that middle 60% of your Yelp reviews.
Yeah, it's such a powerful thing these days, isn't it? Reviews.
It's amazing.
Customer reviews, especially these days. So what is your best advice to other entrepreneurs?
My best advice is something I told a very good friend of mine today, who is leaving the corporate world to become an entrepreneur. And he's an extraordinarily intelligent person. And he took me to breakfast this morning and said, "Charlie, I just need some advice. I need that inspiration. I need to know something. Tell me something." And it was super, super simple, Neil. I told him very, very simply, get started. Just do it. Get started. 2 words.
Absolutely. Brilliant advice. Everyone, if you didn't manage to get a note of Charles's favourite resources or his favourite books, you can find the links on Charles's show notes page. Just go to theentrepreneurway.com and search for Charles or Charles Lew in the search box. Charles, is there anything else that you'd like to add about your business?
No, not really, Neil. I'm in the restaurant business, a fun business. I would tell anyone that has an inkling of getting just the thought of getting involved or some curiosity to give it a stab, go jump in a kitchen somewhere and, wash some dishes and see if the restaurant bug bites you. It's a great door opener. I've managed to kind of parlay it into some other really interesting entrepreneurial opportunities because you literally meet every single person in the world. So, I think it's a fun business, and restaurants open a lot of doors and will keep you well fed.
Yeah. Charles, it's been an absolute honor having you on the show. It's really been enlightening, and you've certainly given us a lot of insight into the entrepreneurial mind and the spirit, and just it's been fantastic. So thank you for coming on the show.
Thanks, Neil. I appreciate it. And I appreciate those questions. I mean, you definitely, there was zero cruise control in this interview, which is good. I mean, really, I'm telling you this with complete sincerity. You do enough of these or, a couple of these and you can literally put your brain on cruise control. And that did not happen at all. So thank you for keeping me on my toes.
You're welcome.
Thank you for listening to The Entrepreneur Way. Subscribe to our podcast and follow us on Twitter @Neil D. Ball.